stand by. The vacuum tubes are warming up. This is a special live broadcast right here on Georgia Radio.
We're continuing our discussion and conversation with local Georgia authors. And this guy, well, he actually came from Texas to Georgia, much like me. And I'm happy to welcome Randy Farmer on the show, who is here to talk about his latest work here, The Knights of the Golden Circle in Texas. Randy, welcome.
Hey, good morning. Thank you.
How did you come to Georgia?
Well, actually, my wife brought me here.
Very similar stories here.
Yeah.
That's a great way to come to. You were invited, you might say.
Yeah, and I had relatives here too, so.
Well, you also had relatives back in Texas, and Texas is an interesting place because in large part settled by folks who were, the unsavory truth is they were often running from debt, and that creates all kind of interesting stories. But talk to me about the Knights of the Golden Circle.
Well, the Knights of the Golden Circle, which many refer to as the KGC, just by their initials, was actually the successor to an earlier secret society that formed in New York City and had to do with the expansion of the United States through the doctrine of manifest destiny, where it was basically okay to illegally occupy territory on this continent that was owned by Spain. And that's how Florida, the Republic of West Florida, came about at an earlier date. There was this predecessor group that were known as the Order of the Lone Star, and it's because of them that many of our state flags have one lone star, like the Texas flag, for instance.
That's pretty interesting. And this has come out of 25 years of research on just this one secret society. What piqued your interest on this?
Well, about 40 years ago, I was going through the effects of an estate in Texas and found this artifact there that was really intriguing. It was an occult item. It was obviously some sort of secret society medallion. And the members of the family said it had been passed down for generations, and they didn't really know anything about it, except it was somehow tied to Freemasons, and it was a bad thing. I mean, that's all they knew about it, really. So I was intrigued by that, and I started investigating what sort of free society or secret society tied to the Freemasons existed in Texas at that time. And it led me to the Knights of the Golden Circle.
And the rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Was there something that really surprised you about your research and tying it back to the metal? Were you able to sort of authenticate the provenance of that artifact, that first artifact?
Yeah, one of the things that surprised me is that it had really never been adequately researched before.
By the family.
Or by historians, and I hope I don't offend them, but the fact is, writing about the Knights of the Golden Circle was politicized early on because they helped precipitate the American Civil War. And so they were hated during and after the Civil War, and the historians got very politically involved in recording the history of it. And so it kind of, the pendulum swung. It was very a volatile situation writing the history of the Knights of the Golden Circle. It swung from after the Civil War, where the KGC was responsible for everything that went wrong, to the other extreme, to where the KGC was really a joke and didn't really have any place in academic history. So I came down sort of in the middle between those two extremes and found that they played a major role in starting the American Civil War. As I mentioned earlier, it started out as a secret society dedicated to the idea of expanding the United States through manifest destiny and conquering all this land that Spain had in this continent that they weren't really managing, like Florida and what became the American South. That was all at one time owned but mismanaged by Spain. And of course, Texas was part of that too. And under Mexico, when Texas fell under Mexico, slavery became illegal. So there was an impetus for Texas to break away from Mexico because of slave ownership. Because slave ownership back then in different parts of the world, including the American South, that was a major source of wealth for the upper class in that part of the country. And so they had a major investment in slaves, more so than they did in land. So, and they had political influence too. Abraham Lincoln referred to those people that I just described as the slave power, because they did have some political power on the national stage. They were wealthy people.
And I'm curious if in your research you were able to uncover any of its membership, prominent membership.
Oh, yeah, quite a bit. That was another thing that surprised me, that this information is out there, but for some reason it was never really adequately covered, probably because some of the families that are descended from some of these people were embarrassed by it in the early days. And so it's sort of got pushed back on the shelf. But I was able to find these primary source documents that list the names of the some of the top people in this underground secret society.
And I'm curious just how far up it went. Are you able to divulge any of that?
Yeah, pretty high. They have these people that Abraham Lincoln referred to as the slave power. They were members of the United States Congress. They were certainly military men, because the Mexican-American War also played a role in the formation of the Knights of the Golden Circle. When we took over Mexico and occupied it in the 1840s, the U.S. military leaders that were in charge of the occupation of Mexico City noted that in Mexico, the peons were very much like American slaves. And so their thought was, well, we shed blood to conquer Mexico. Why should we give it back? Which is exactly what the U.S. government did. It pulled our troops out of Mexico, gave it back to the Mexican people, which didn't sit well with a lot of these generals who were also slave owners. Their thought was we should keep it and turn it into slave states so that the slave power will have a bigger voice in the United States Congress.
Well, it's fascinating research, and what amazes me is just how much of Georgia is tied into this, and the American South. I mean, all over. So we're talking about guys like Sam Houston and people like that that might have potentially been on the rolls of this secret society.
Well, he absolutely was. He was also a member of the Order of the Lone Star and the Tammany Society in New York, which originally the Order of the Lone Star was formed in New York in the 1840s, if not earlier, and they met in Tammany Hall in New York City. But after they were exposed in the press, they moved their headquarters down to New Orleans and sort of started over. And then eventually that was exposed and had to change gears, so to speak, and it became the Knights of the Golden Circle, whose headquarters eventually wound up in Montgomery, Alabama, at the start of the Civil War.
And I wanted to find out, is this your preference in writing, is to uncover this this type of information and then put it into story form, or a documentary, I guess, a historical document, scholarly journal type? Is this your forte in writing?
Yes, thank you for asking that. I mean, why should I try to write yet another book about Abraham Lincoln? There are hundreds of books written about figures like that. So what I've always tried to do is to debunk certain areas of our history as it is, our historical archived history, try to shed light on the realities of it. And I don't do that with an agenda. I don't go in there. I know this sounds like a cliche, but I am looking for the truth. So I try to show all sides of what was going on.
And do you have any future plans? Are you looking at another story at the moment?
Well, I spent so long researching this book that I wound up with a ton of material, and I couldn't get it all in one book. So I've written a follow-up book that I hope to hear from my publisher. They will publish soon. And so that has been accomplished. I finished writing the follow-up book to the one that we've been talking about, and we'll see where it goes from there.
That's exciting stuff right there. And it's interesting to me that so much of this has gone untold. And we're just now at the point, I think, where you're going to start seeing a lot of the interest in this type of subject matter come forward, and who knows where that will lead. Well, it's fascinating work, and it's a great read. It's called, again, The Knights of the Golden Circle. And where can you find it, Randy?
Well, certainly Amazon. You can buy it from Amazon online. And if you can't do that, you can get a Kindle copy of it through the publisher, which is Histria Books. You can buy it a Kindle version, or you can buy the paperback version from them or from Amazon.com.
And if folks want to follow along with you, how's the best way to do it?
Oh, best way is, I guess, to follow me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook.
Just look for Randy Farmer on Facebook.
Or Randolph W. Farmer, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like a better name for a writer, Randolph W. Farmer. Is that how you publish?
Yeah, I have to. Believe it or not, in the Atlanta metro area, there are 6 or 7 guys named Randy Farmer. It's a very southern name.
Yeah, like
apparently.
Bob Smith. I mean, you just never know. So, but Randolph W. Farmer sounds like a better guy to go chasing the Knights of the Golden Circle. I mean, you don't want Randolph coming after you. Randy. Well,
yes, sir.
You never know. He might be your buddy, but Randolph, that guy's going to come with a serious pen in his hand. I gotta ask: have you been a writer your whole career, or is this something that you do for the enjoyment of it all?
Well, originally I got a master's degree in business and wound up being a adjunct professor at different colleges, teaching financial planning. So in some way, research was always a thing for me, but I've been writing since I was very young and never stopped, really. And when I finally retired 8 years ago, I made it a full-time thing.
I think that's great. The Atlanta Writers Club, a wonderful resource for writers like yourself and so many others. What has that membership brought to you as far as your talent and the workmanship of writing? I mean, talent is one thing, but it's hard work, and I'm curious what that's afforded you through the membership there.
Well, it's a great organization, really. They're very well organized, and they hold events on a regular basis. So they have different ways you keep your head in the game, so to speak, and they bring in accomplished writers that have been published many times who are successful, and they serve as speakers at our local meetings. And then every 6 months, they have what is, in effect, a national meeting, which will be held again starting tomorrow in Atlanta. And I'll be there to listen to the guest speakers and also to pitch my latest book that is the follow-up to The Knights of the Golden Circle in Texas.
Well, Randolph W. Farmer, we'll call you Randy today, but Randy, thanks for coming on. It's great stuff, and I'll tell you what, Knights of the Golden Circle. I want to go do some more research in this because Texas history is really U.S. history, and it so deeply affects everything that was going on here in the American South and further. It's like the end of the rock when you throw that rock in the water and you see those reverberations on the top. Texas is sort of right before it bounces back and comes back here. It seems it all trickles down there.
It's kind of the tip of the spear in some ways.
Yeah, oftentimes on the way back, which is interesting to me because everything sort of trickled down there, and it was sort of the last stop on the line before it returned. Interesting stuff there, and I'm looking forward to taking a deeper dive on this second book as well. But
well, good,
Randy, thanks for coming on and sharing with us today. Great stuff.
Thank you, Matt.
Georgia Radio, on your phone, in your home, everywhere you go.